Sometimes the world watches a player who is making history on the football field, but behind that legendary player, there is a story that very few people know. A young boy who decided to leave his home, his city, and the people he loved in order to turn his dream into reality. A boy who had football at his feet, but carried the love of his family in his heart. And in this story, there was also a sister who never saw her brother simply as one of the greatest footballers in the world. To her, he was still the same little brother, the boy who once played football in the streets of Argentina. This is the story of Lionel Messi, a name that changed the history of football forever. But today, we are not going to talk only about his goals, trophies, and records. Today, we are going to discover the story of the human being behind the legend. The person who had a family standing behind him, a mother, a father, brothers, and a sister who watched her brother's incredible journey from very close. But the question is, when did this young boy's dream become so big that he had to leave his family and travel thousands of miles away? And did Messi's family ever imagine that this little boy would one day become one of the most famous footballers in the world? This story begins in Rosario, Argentina, a city where football is not just a sport, it is a way of life. And this is where a young boy grew up with a football at his feet. His name was Lionel Messi. Messi's childhood was not like that of an ordinary child. While other children went to the field simply to play, Messi saw football as his dream. Whenever the ball reached his feet, it felt as if he had been born to control it. He was small in size, but his dreams were enormous. His family quickly realized that there was something different about this child. He was not simply playing football, he seemed to understand it. The ball would reach his feet, and just moments later, opposing players would be left behind. But there was a major obstacle standing in the way of his dream: Messi's health. During his childhood, it was discovered that he needed medical treatment for a health condition. The treatment was expensive, and for an ordinary family, covering the cost was not easy. But Messi's parents refused to give up on their son's dream. And this was the beginning of a journey that was about much more than football. It was about sacrifice, patience, and the unconditional love of a family. Messi's sister and the rest of his family were also part of this journey. Inside the family, he was still just an ordinary brother. But outside the home, he was becoming a young boy that people were beginning to talk about. People started saying that there was something special about this child. His dribbling was different. His control was extraordinary. And perhaps one day he would play on the biggest football stages in the world. But then came the moment when Messi faced one of the most difficult decisions of his young life. Should he stay with his family and continue chasing his dream in his hometown? Or should he travel to a country where nobody knew him? A place with a different language, a different culture, and a life where he might have to live far away from his family. It was not an easy decision, because sometimes achieving your dreams requires more than hard work. It requires sacrifice. And that moment had finally arrived in Messi's life. On one side, there was his home, his family, his sister, his city. And on the other side, there was a dream that could possibly change his entire world. Eventually, Messi chose the path that would change his life forever. He traveled to Spain, and Barcelona's famous academy, La Masia, became the next major chapter in his journey. But a new battle was about to begin. A young boy, far away from his home and far away from his family, was now surrounded by some of the most talented young footballers in the world. He had to fight for his place. Every day was a test. Every training session was a challenge. And every match was another opportunity to prove himself. But one thing always remained alive in Messi's heart: his family. And perhaps that is why, whenever he stepped onto the football field, his performances were about more than just the hard work of one player. Behind him were the dreams of an entire family. A family that believed in their son's dream. A sister who knew her brother before the world knew his name. And a young boy who was slowly moving closer to becoming one of the greatest footballers the world had ever seen. But Messi's real story was only beginning. Because one day at La Masia, a moment would arrive. A moment when this small, quiet boy would finally show the world that there was something truly extraordinary inside him. What was that moment? And how did this quiet young boy go from the football fields of Barcelona to the hearts of millions of people around the world? He was no longer the little boy playing football in the streets of Argentina. Now, he was in Spain, at Barcelona's famous academy, La Masia. But simply getting there was not enough. The real test was about to begin. Messi was surrounded by young players who dreamed of becoming part of one of the greatest football clubs in the world. Everyone was talented, everyone was working hard, and everyone wanted to prove themselves. But there was something different about Messi. Whenever the ball reached his feet, it felt as if time stopped for a few moments. He was small in size, but his dribbling, his control of the ball, and his ability to move through defenders were completely different from everyone else. The coaches were slowly beginning to realize that this boy was not ordinary. But there was one difficulty that always remained. Messi was far away from his family. At an age when most children live with their parents and siblings, Messi was building a new life in another country to chase his dream. Sometimes success comes with a very high price, and for Messi, that price was not easy to pay. His family was back in Argentina, his loved ones, his own world, and his sister, who did not see her brother as a global superstar. To her, he was simply the ordinary boy from her family. But Messi now had one goal: football, only football. Every day he tried to become better than he was the day before. At every training session, he worked to prove himself. And he used every opportunity to move one step closer to his dream. Then came the moment when Messi got the opportunity to move closer to the first team. This was the level where talent alone was not enough. The world's best players were there. Every pass mattered, every decision mattered, and every mistake could push you backward. But Messi was not afraid. He let his football do the talking. And then, the day finally arrived. The day that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in football history. Lionel Messi stepped onto the pitch for Barcelona's senior team, a young player whose name was not yet known around the world, but who would soon become a name on the lips of football fans everywhere. Messi's style on the pitch was different. He did not rely on physical strength. Instead of speed alone, he played with the speed of his mind. One moment, the ball was at his feet, and the next, he had already moved past several defenders. Fans were amazed, experts were amazed, and opposing teams were worried. Who was this young player, and how could he move past defenders with such incredible ease? Over time, Messi established himself at Barcelona, and then another legendary name became an important part of his journey: Ronaldinho, the Brazilian magician who recognized the talent of the young Messi. Their friendship and partnership on the pitch helped accelerate Messi's journey. Messi was no longer just a young talent, he was becoming a star. Then came the goals. The records began to fall, the trophies started to arrive, and the world watched as a new era of football began. But behind all this success, the story of Messi's family never disappeared. When he was winning the biggest awards in the world, when millions of people were chanting his name, his family still remained incredibly important to him, because Messi knew his success did not begin on the day he lifted a trophy. His success began much earlier. It began on the day his family believed in his dream, when sacrifices were made to support his medical treatment, when his family allowed their young son to travel to a new country, and when his sister saw her brother, not as the Lionel Messi the world would eventually know, but simply as her brother. Eventually, Messi's name became part of the conversation about the greatest footballers in history. But one dream was still waiting to be fulfilled, a dream that had lived in his heart since childhood: winning the biggest tournament in the world with the Argentina national team. Messi had achieved almost everything in club football, but success with his national team was still an unfinished chapter in his story. Several times he reached major finals. Several times he experienced heartbreaking defeats, and after every loss, the pressure on him grew stronger. Some people began asking, Is Messi really one of the greatest players of all time? Can he win the biggest trophy for his country? These questions followed Messi throughout his career, but he never gave up. He tried again and again. And then the moment finally arrived. The moment that not only Messi had been waiting for, but an entire nation had been waiting for. A moment when the dream of a young boy, the sacrifices of a family, and the hopes of an entire country would all come together on one football field. And this time, Messi was not simply fighting for a trophy. He was fighting for history, and the entire world was watching to see if Lionel Messi could finally turn his greatest dream into reality. The answer to that question. And then, the day finally arrived. The day Lionel Messi had been waiting for all his life. A day for which he had dedicated his entire life to football. The Argentina jersey, the biggest trophy in the world, and standing before him, the FIFA World Cup. Messi was already considered one of the greatest footballers of all time. With Barcelona, he had achieved countless victories. He had broken records, he had won trophies, and he had collected some of the biggest individual awards in football. But there was still one dream left in his heart, the World Cup, the trophy that meant everything to his country. And perhaps it meant everything to him too, because Messi knew there was still one major question left to answer in his career. Could he lead Argentina to World Cup glory? The year was 2022, Qatar, the FIFA World Cup. Messi stepped onto the pitch, but this time something was different. He was not just a player, he was the captain of Argentina. The hopes of an entire nation were resting on his shoulders, and perhaps his family was watching too. The people who had seen Messi before the world knew his name, who had witnessed his struggles, his victories, and his defeats. Now Messi had the opportunity to achieve the greatest success of his life. But the World Cup journey would not be easy. Argentina suffered a shocking defeat in their very first match. The world was stunned. Would Messi's dream be broken once again? Would Argentina fail again? But after that defeat, Messi and his team gathered themselves. They moved forward. One match, then another, and then another. Messi continued to lead his team in every game. Goals, assists, and unforgettable moments that captured the attention of the entire world. Then Argentina reached the final, and standing in their way was France, a team featuring the young superstar Kylian Mbappe. The final began, and then the world witnessed one of the most unforgettable matches in football history. Argentina took the lead. Messi scored. Then the game took a dramatic turn. France fought back. The match was level. Then Argentina took the lead again. But France came back once more, and the match eventually went to a penalty shootout. At that moment, the entire world was watching. Messi was standing on the pitch. In front of him was the trophy he had dreamed of winning since childhood. And then Argentina won the penalty shootout. Lionel Messi was a World Cup champion. That moment was not simply a victory in a football match. It was the end of years of waiting. It was an answer to all the defeats that had once tried to break Messi. It was an answer to everyone who had questioned his greatness. And above all, it was the fulfillment of a family's dream. A family that had believed in a little boy. When Messi lifted the World Cup trophy, the world saw a legendary footballer. But perhaps his family saw the same little boy in that moment. The boy who once played football in the streets of Argentina. The same child who always had a football at his feet. The same child who once dreamed the biggest dream in the world. And perhaps, for Messi's sister, this was not simply a World Cup victory. It was a reminder of the journey that their family had started many years earlier. A journey that included separation, difficulties, sacrifices, and countless dreams. To the world, Messi is a legend, a superstar, one of the greatest names in football history. But to his family, he is still simply Messi. The same brother, the same son, The same little boy who once began his journey with nothing more than a football. And perhaps that is the most beautiful part of Messi's story. The world saw his goals. The world saw his trophies. The world saw his records. But behind all those achievements, there were also the quiet sacrifices of a family, a mother's prayers, a father's belief, the love of his brothers and sister, and the dream of a young boy who refused to give up. Today, Lionel Messi's name is forever written into the history of football, but his story teaches us a powerful lesson. Success does not come from talent alone. It requires hard work, patience, sacrifice, and above all, belief in your dream. Messi showed us that sometimes the world may take time to recognize your abilities, but if you believe in yourself, one day the world will have no choice but to believe in you. A young boy from a city in Argentina traveled to the other side of the world. He moved away from his family. He faced difficulties. He suffered defeats. He endured criticism. But he never walked away from his dream. And then, one day, he lifted the biggest football trophy in the world in his hands. Perhaps that is why Lionel Messi's story is not just a story about football. It is a story about dreaming. It is a story about the love of family. It is a story about sacrifice. And it is a story about believing that if you continue fighting for your dream until the very end, one day, that dream can become reality. Even today, when Messi steps onto the football field, millions of eyes watch him. But his story reminds us that behind every legend, there is a human being. And behind every great journey, there is a family, a dream, and a story that is far greater than what the world sees. So now the question is for you. Do you believe Lionel Messi is the greatest footballer in the history of the game? Or do you think another player is ahead of him? Share your opinion in the comments. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more incredible football stories. Because behind every legend, there is a story. And perhaps the next story will be about another player who amazed the world. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.